Chapter 20. The Mazindaran Upheaval, Part 2. The forces under the command of Prince Mehdi Kuli Mirza meanwhile had recovered from the state of utter demoralization into which they had sunk, and were now diligently preparing to renew their attack upon the occupants of the fort of Tabarsi. The latter found themselves again encompassed by a numerous host, at the head of which marched Abbas Kuli Khan-i Larijani and Suleiman Khan-i Afshar-i Shariari, who, together with several regiments of infantry and cavalry, had hastened to reinforce the company of the prince's soldiers. Their combined forces encamped in the neighborhood of the fort and proceeded to erect a series of 7 barricades around it. With the utmost arrogance, they sought at first to display the extent of the forces at their command, and indulged with increasing zest in the daily exercise of their arms. The scarcity of water had, in the meantime, compelled those who were besieged to dig a well within the enclosure of the fort. On the day the work was to be completed, the 8th day of the month of Rabiul Awwal, the 1st of February, A.D. 1849, Mullah Hussein, who was watching his companions perform this task, remarked, "Today we shall have all the water we require for our bath. Cleansed of all earthly defilements, we shall seek the court of the Almighty, and shall hasten to our eternal abode. Whoso is willing to partake of the cup of martyrdom, let him prepare himself and wait for the hour when he can seal with his life-blood his faith in his cause. This night, ere the hour of dawn, let those who wish to join me be ready to issue forth from behind these walls, and, scattering once again the dark forces which have beset our path, ascend untrammeled to the heights of glory." That same afternoon, Mullah Hussein performed his ablutions, clothed himself in new garments, attired his head with a barb's turban, and prepared for the approaching encounter. An undefinable joy illumined his face. He serenely alluded to the hour of his departure, and continued to his last moments to animate the zeal of his companions. Alone with Qudus, who so powerfully reminded him of his beloved, he poured forth, as he sat at his feet, in the closing moments of his earthly life, all that an enraptured soul could no longer restrain. Soon after midnight, as soon as the morning star had risen, the star that heralded to him the dawning light of eternal reunion with his beloved, he started to his feet, and, mounting his charger, gave the signal that the gate of the fort be opened. As he rode out at the head of 313 of his companions to meet the enemy, the cry of "Ya Sahibus Saman" again broke forth, a cry so intense and powerful that forest, fort, and camp vibrated to its resounding echo. Mullah Hussein first charged the barricade, which was defended by Zakariya-i Qadi Kalai, one of the enemy's most valiant officers. Within a short space of time he had broken through that barrier, disposed of its commander, and scattered his men. Dashing forward with the same swiftness and intrepidity, he overcame the resistance of both the 2nd and 3rd barricades, diffusing as he advanced despair and consternation among his foes. Undeterred by the bullets which rained continually upon him and his companions, they pressed forward until the remaining barricades had all been captured and overthrown. In the midst of the tumult which ensued, Abbas Kuli Khan-i Larijani had climbed a tree and, hiding himself in its branches, lay waiting in ambush for his opponents. Protected by the darkness which surrounded him, he was able to follow from his hiding place the movements of Mullah Hussein and his companions, who were exposed to the fierce glare of the conflagration which they had raised. The steed of Mullah Hussein suddenly became entangled in the rope of an adjoining tent, and ere he was able to extricate himself, he was struck in the breast by a bullet from his treacherous assailant. Though the shot was successful, Abbas Kuli Khan was unaware of the identity of the horseman he had wounded. Mullah Hussein, who was bleeding profusely, dismounted from his horse, staggered a few steps, and, unable to proceed further, fell exhausted upon the ground. 2 of his young companions, of Khorasan, Kuli, and Hassan, came to his rescue and bore him to the fort. I have heard the following account from Mullah Sadiq and Mullah Mirza Muhammadi Farooqi. We were among those who had remained in the fort with Qudus. As soon as Mullah Hussein, who seemed to have lost consciousness, was brought in, we were ordered to retire. "Leave me alone with him," were the words of Qudus as he bade Mirza Muhammad Baqir close the door and refuse admittance to anyone desiring to see him. "There are certain confidential matters which I desire him alone to know." We were amazed a few minutes later when we heard the voice of Mullah Hussein replying to questions from Qudus. For 2 hours they continued to converse with each other. We were surprised to see Mirza Muhammad Baqir so greatly agitated. "I was watching Qudus," he subsequently informed us, "through a fissure in the door. As soon as he called his name, I saw Mullah Hussein arise and seat himself in his customary manner on bended knees beside him. With bowed head and downcast eyes, he listened to every word that fell from the lips of Qudus and answered his questions. 'You have hastened the hour of your departure,' I was able to hear Qudus remark, 'and have abandoned me to the mercy of my foes. Please God, I will ere long join you and taste the sweetness of heaven's ineffable delights.' I was able to gather the following words uttered by Mullah Hussein: 'May my life be a ransom for you. Are you well pleased with me?' A long time elapsed before Qudus bade Mirza Muhammad Baqir to open the door and admit his companions. 'I have bade my last farewell to him,' he said as we entered the room. 'Things which previously I deemed it unallowable to utter, I have now shared with him.' We found on our arrival that Mullah Hussein had expired. A faint smile still lingered upon his face. Such was the peacefulness of his countenance that he seemed to have fallen asleep. Qudus attended to his burial, clothed him in his own shirt, and gave instructions to lay him to rest to the south of it, and adjoining the shrine of Sheikh Tabasi. 'Well is it with you to have remained to your last hour faithful to the covenant of God,' he said as he laid a parting kiss upon his eyes and forehead. 'I pray God to grant that no division ever be caused between you and me.' He spoke with such poignancy that the 7 companions who were standing beside him wept profusely and wished they had been sacrificed in his stead. Qudus, with his own hands, laid the body in the tomb and cautioned those who were standing near him to maintain secrecy regarding the spot which served as his resting place, and to conceal it even from their companions. He afterwards instructed them to inter the bodies of the 36 martyrs who had fallen in the course of that engagement in one and the same grave on the northern side of the shrine of Sheikh Tabasi. 'Let the loved ones of God,' he was heard to remark as he consigned them to their tomb, 'take heed of the example of these martyrs of our faith. Let them in life be and remain as united as these are now in death.' No less than 90 of the companions were wounded that night, most of whom succumbed. From the day of their arrival at Baha'I to the day they were first attacked, which fell on the 12th of Zil Qadi in the year AH 1264, the 10th of October AD 1848, to the day of the death of Mullah Hussein, which took place at the hour of dawn on the 9th of Rabiul Awwal in the year AH 1265, the 2nd of February AD 1849, the number of martyrs, according to the computation of Mirza Muhammad Baqir, had reached a total of 72. From the time when Mullah Hussein was assailed by his enemies to the time of his martyrdom was 116 days, a period rendered memorable by deeds so heroic that even his bitterest foes felt bound to confess their wonder. On 4 distinct occasions he rose to such heights of courage and power as few indeed could attain. The first encounter took place on the 12th of Zil Qadi, the 10th of October, AD 1848, in the outskirts of Baha'I, the second in the immediate neighborhood of the fort of Sheikh Tabasi, on the 5th day of the month of Muharram, the 1st of December, AD 1848, against the forces of Abdullah Khan-i Turkoman. The third in Vaskaz, on the 25th day of Muharram, the 21st of December, AD 1848, and was directed against the army of Prince Mihdi Quli Mirza. The last and most memorable battle of all was directed against the combined forces of Abbas Quli Khan, of Prince Mihdi Quli Mirza, and of Suleiman Khan-i Afshar, assisted by a company of 45 officers of tried ability and mature experience. From each of these hot and fierce engagements, Mullah Hussein emerged, in spite of the overwhelming forces arrayed against him, unscathed and triumphant. In each encounter he distinguished himself by such acts of valor, of chivalry, of skill, and of strength, that each one alone would suffice to establish for all time the transcendent character of a faith for the protection of which he had so valiantly fought, and in the path of which he had so nobly died. The traits of mind and of character which from his very youth he displayed, the profundity of his learning, the tenacity of his faith, his intrepid courage, his singleness of purpose, his high sense of justice and unswerving devotion, marked him as an outstanding figure among those who, by their lives, have borne witness to the glory and power of the new revelation. He was 36 years old when he quaffed the cup of martyrdom. At the age of 18, he had made the acquaintance in Karbila of Sayyid Kazim Rashdi. For 9 years he sat at his feet and imbibed the lesson which was destined to prepare him for the acceptance of the message of the Bab. The 9 remaining years of his life were spent in the midst of a restless, feverish activity which carried him eventually to the field of martyrdom, in circumstances that have shed imperishable lustre upon his country's history. So complete and humiliating a rout paralyzed for a time the efforts of the enemy. 45 days passed before they could again reassemble their forces and renew their attack. During these intervening days, which ended with the day of Nowruz, the intense cold which prevailed induced them to defer their venture against an opponent that had covered them with so much reproach and shame. Though their attacks had been suspended, the officers in charge of the remnants of the imperial army had given strict orders prohibiting the arrival of all manner of reinforcements at the fort. When the supply of their provisions was nearly exhausted, Qudus instructed Mirza Muhammad Baqir to distribute among his companions the rice which Mullah Hussein had stored for such time as might be required. When each had received his portion, Qudus summoned them and said, "Whoever feels himself strong enough to withstand the calamities that are soon to befall us, let him remain with us in this fort. And whoever perceives in himself the least hesitation and fear, let him betake himself away from this place. Let him leave immediately ere the enemy has again assembled his forces and assailed us. The way will soon be barred before our face. We shall very soon encounter the severest hardship and fall a victim to devastating afflictions." The very night Qudus had given this warning, a seer from Qum, Mirza Hussein-i Mutawali, was moved to betray his companions. "Why is it," he wrote to Abbas Quli Khan-i Larijani, "that you have left unfinished the work which you have begun? You have already disposed of a formidable opponent. By the removal of Mullah Hussein, who was the moving force behind these walls, you have demolished the pillar on which the strength and security of the fort depend. Had you been patient for one more day, you would have assuredly won for yourself the laurels of victory. With no more than 100 men, I pledge my word that within the space of 2 days you will be able to capture the fort and secure the unconditional surrender of its occupants. They are worn with famine and are being grievously tested." The sealed letter was entrusted to a certain Sayyid Ali-i Zargar, who, as he carried with him the share of the rice he had received from Qudus, stole out of the fort at the hour of midnight and delivered it to Abbas Quli Khan, with whom he was already acquainted. The message reached him at a time when he had sought refuge in a village situated at a distance of 4 farsangs from the fort, and knew not whether he should return to the capital and present himself after such a humiliating defeat to his sovereign, or repair to his home in Larejan, where he was sure to face the reproaches of his relations and friends. He had just risen from his bed when, at the hour of sunrise, the Seyyid brought him the letter. The news of the death of Mullah Hussein nerved him to a fresh resolve. Fearing lest the messenger should spread the report concerning the death of so redoubtable an opponent, he instantly killed him, and then contrived by some strange device to divert from himself the suspicion of murder. Resolved to take the fullest advantage of the distress of the besieged and of the depletion of their forces, he undertook immediately the necessary preparations for the resumption of his attacks. 10 days before Nowruz, he had encamped at half a farsang from the fort, and had ascertained the accuracy of the message that treacherous Seyyid had brought him. In the hope of obtaining for himself every possible credit for the eventual surrender of his opponents, he refused to divulge to even his closest officers the information he had received. The day had just broken when he hoisted his standard and, marching at the head of 2 regiments of infantry and cavalry, encompassed the fort and ordered his men to open fire upon the sentinels who were guarding the turrets. The betrayer, Qudus informed Mirza Muhammad Baqir, who had hastened to acquaint him with the gravity of the situation, has announced the death of Mullah Hussein to Abbas Quli Khan. Emboldened by his removal, he is now determined to storm our stronghold and to secure for himself the honor of being its sole conqueror. Sally out and, with the aid of 18 men marching at your side, administer a befitting chastisement upon the aggressor and his host. Let him realize that though Mullah Hussein be no more, God's invincible power still continues to sustain his companions and enable them to triumph. No sooner had Mirza Muhammad Baqir selected his companions than he ordered that the gate of the fort be flung open. Leaping upon their chargers and raising the cry of Ya Sahibu Saman, they plunged headlong into the camp of the enemy. The whole army fled in confusion before so terrific a charge. All but a few were able to escape. They reached Barfurush utterly demoralized and laden with shame. Abbas Quli Khan was so shaken with fear that he fell from his horse. Leaving in his distress one of his boots hanging from the stirrup, he ran away half-shod and bewildered in the direction which the army had taken. Filled with despair, he hastened to the prince and confessed the ignominious reverse he had sustained. Mirza Muhammad Baqir, on his part, emerging together with his 18 companions unscathed from that encounter, and holding in his hand the standard which an affrighted enemy had abandoned, repaired with exultation to the fort and submitted to his chief, who had inspired him with such courage as evidence of his victory. So complete a rout immediately brought relief to the hardened companions. It cemented their unity and reminded them afresh of the efficacy of that power with which their faith had endowed them. Their food, alas, was by this time reduced to the flesh of horses which they had brought away with them from the deserted camp of the enemy. With steadfast fortitude they endured the afflictions which beset them from every side. Their hearts were set on the wishes of Qudus. All else mattered but little. Neither the severity of their distress nor the continual threats of the enemy could cause them to deviate a hair-breadth from the path which their departed companions had so heroically trodden. A few were found who subsequently faltered in the darkest hour of adversity. The faint-heartedness which this negligible element was compelled to betray paled, however, into insignificance before the radiance which the mass of their stout-hearted companions shed in the hour of realized doom. Prince Mehdi Quli Mirza, who was stationed at Sari, welcomed with keen delight the news of the defeat that had overtaken the forces under the immediate command of his colleague, Abbas Quli Khan. Though himself desirous of extirpating the band that had sought shelter behind the walls of the fort, he rejoiced at the knowledge that his rival had failed to secure the victory which he coveted. He wrote immediately to Tehran and demanded that reinforcements in the form of bombshells and camel artillery, with all the necessary equipments, be dispatched without delay to the neighborhood of the fort, he being determined this time to effect the complete subjugation of its obstinate occupants. Whilst their enemies were preparing for yet another and still fiercer attack upon their stronghold, the companions of Qudus, utterly indifferent to the gnawing distress that afflicted them, acclaimed with joy and gratitude the approach of Nowruz. In the course of that festival, they gave free vent to their feelings of thanksgiving and praise in return for the manifold blessings which the Almighty had bestowed upon them. Though oppressed with hunger, they indulged in songs and merriment, utterly disdaining the danger with which they were beset. The fort resounded with the ascriptions of glory and praise which, both in the daytime and in the night season, ascended from the hearts of that joyous band. The verse, "Holy, holy, the Lord our God, the Lord of the angels and the Spirit," issued unceasingly from their lips, heightened their enthusiasm, and reanimated their courage. All that remained of the cattle they had brought with them to the fort was a cow which Haji Naziruddin-i Qazvini had set aside, and the milk of which he made into a pudding every day for the table of Qudus. Unwilling to deny his hunger-stricken friends their share of the delicacy which his devoted companion prepared for him, Qudus would, after partaking of a few teaspoonfuls of that dish, invariably distribute the rest among them. "I have ceased to enjoy," he was often heard to remark, "since the departure of Mullah Hussein, the meat and drink which they prepare for me. My heart bleeds at the sight of my famished companions, worn and wasted around me. Despite these adverse circumstances, he unfailingly continued further to elucidate in his commentary the significance of the Sad of Samad, and to exhort his friends to persevere till the very end in their heroic endeavours. At morn and at eventide, Mirza Muhammad Baqir would chant, in the presence of the assembled believers, verses from that commentary, the reading of which would quicken their enthusiasm and brighten their hopes. I have heard Mullah Mirza Muhammad-i Faruqi testify to the following. God knows that we had ceased to hunger for food. Our thoughts were no longer concerned with matters pertaining to our daily bread. We were so enraptured by the entrancing melody of those verses that, were we to have continued for years in that state, no trace of weariness and fatigue could possibly have dimmed our enthusiasm or marred our gladness. And whenever the lack of nourishment would tend to sap our vitality and weaken our strength, Mirza Muhammad Baqir would hasten to Qurus and acquaint him with our plight. A glimpse of his face, the magic of his words as he walked amongst us, would transmute our despondency into golden joy. We were reinforced with a strength of such intensity that, had the host of our enemies appeared suddenly before us, we felt ourselves capable of subjugating their forces. On the day of Nowruz, which fell on the 24th of Rabi-ul-Thani, in the year A.H. 1265, A.D. 1849, Qudus alluded, in a written message to his companions, to the approach of such trials as would bring in their wake the martyrdom of a considerable number of his friends. A few days later, an innumerable host, commanded by Prince Mihdi Quli Mirza and seconded by the joint forces of Suleiman Khan-i Afshar, of Abbas Quli Khan-i Larijani, and of Jafar Quli Khan, assisted by about 40 other officers, encamped in the neighbourhood of the fort and set about constructing a series of trenches and barricades in its immediate vicinity. On the 9th day of the month of Bahar, a footnote says the 9th day after Nowruz, the commanding officer gave orders to those in charge of his artillery to open fire in the direction of the besieged. While the bombardment was in progress, Qudus emerged from his room and walked to the centre of the fort. His face was wreathed in smiles, and his demeanour breathed forth the utmost tranquillity. As he was pacing the floor, a cannonball suddenly fell before him. "How utterly unaware," he calmly remarked as he rolled it with his foot, "are those boastful aggressors of the power of God's avenging wrath? Have they forgotten that a creature as insignificant as a gnat was capable of extinguishing the life of the all-powerful Nimrod? Have they not heard that the roaring of the tempest was sufficient to destroy the people of Ad and Thamud, and to annihilate their forces? Seek they to intimidate the heroes of God, in whose sight the pomp of royalty is but an empty shadow, with such contemptible evidences of their cruelty? You are," he added as he turned to his friends, "those same companions of whom Muhammad, the apostle of God, has thus spoken. Oh, how I long to behold the countenance of my brethren who will appear in the end of the world. Blessed are we, blessed are they, greater is their blessedness than ours. Beware lest you allow the encroachments of self and desire to impair so glorious a station. Fear not the threats of the wicked, neither be dismayed by the clamour of the ungodly. Each one of you has his appointed hour, and when that time is come, neither the assaults of your enemy nor the endeavours of your friends will be able either to retard or to advance that hour. If the powers of the earth league themselves against you, they will be powerless, ere that hour strikes, to lessen by one jot or tittle the span of your life. Should you allow your hearts to be agitated for but one moment by the boomings of these guns, which, with increasing violence, will continue to shower their shot upon this fort, you will have cast yourselves out of the stronghold of divine protection." So powerful an appeal could not fail to breathe confidence into the hearts of those who heard it. A few, however, whose countenances betrayed vacillation and fear, were seen huddled together in a sheltered corner of the fort, viewing with envy and surprise the zeal that animated their companions. The army of Prince Mihdi Quli Mirza continued for a few days to fire in the direction of the fort. His men were surprised to find that the booming of their guns had failed to silence the voice of prayer and the acclamations of joy which the besieged raised in answer to their threats. Instead of the unconditional surrender which they expected, the call of the muezzin, the chanting of the verses of the Koran, and the chorus of gladsome voices intoning hymns and thanksgiving and praise reached their ears without ceasing. Exasperated by these evidences of unquenchable fervour, and impelled by a burning desire to extinguish the enthusiasm which swelled within the breasts of his opponents, Jafar Kuli Khan erected a tower, upon which he stationed his cannon, and from that eminence directed his fire into the heart of the fort. A footnote here says, "Thus the latter constructed 4 towers on the 4 sides of the castle, and raised them so high that they were able to command the interior of the fortress with their guns, and to make the garrison targets for their bullets. Then the faithful, seeing this, began to dig subterranean passages, and to retreat thither. But the ground of Mazindaran lies near the water, so that these poor sufferers dwelt amidst mud and water till their garments rotted away with damp." From the Tarikh-i-Jadid, page 81. Qudus immediately summoned Mirza Muhammad Baqir, and instructed him to sally again and inflict upon the boastful newcomer a humiliation no less crushing than the one which Abbas Quli Khan had suffered. "Let him know," he added, "that God's lion-hearted warriors, when pressed and driven by hunger, are able to manifest deeds of such heroism as no ordinary mortals can show. Let him know that the greater their hunger, the more devastating shall be the effects of their exasperation." Mirza Muhammad Baqir again ordered 18 of his companions to hurry to their steeds and follow him. The gates of the fort were thrown open, and the cry of "Ya Sahibuz Saman," fiercer and more thrilling than ever, diffused panic and consternation in the ranks of the enemy. Jafar Kuli Khan, with 30 of his men, fell before the sword of their adversary, who rushed to the tower, captured the guns, and hurled them to the ground. Thence they threw themselves upon the barricades which had been erected, demolished a number of them, and would, but for the approaching darkness, have captured and destroyed the rest. Triumphant and unhurt, they repaired to the fort, carrying back with them a number of the stoutest and best-fed stallions which had been left behind. A few days elapsed, during which there was no sign of a counter-attack. A sudden explosion in one of the ammunition stores of the enemy, which had caused the death of several artillery officers and a number of their fellow combatants, forced them for 1 whole month to suspend their attacks upon the garrison. A footnote here says, "The siege had been going on for 4 months, and had made no visible progress. The old fortifications had been destroyed, but with indomitable energy the Babis had built new ones, and night and day they restored and enlarged them. It was impossible to foresee the outcome of this situation, the more so because, as I have already said, Mazindaran was not the only region in Persia where the devotees of the new faith were giving evidence of their zeal and their daring. The king and the prime minister, in their anxiety, burst forth into abuse against their lieutenants. Not only did they charge them with incompetence in the most bitter terms, but they threatened to extend to them the same treatment planned for the Babis, if a final settlement were not reached without delay. Thereupon the command was taken from Mirdi Quli Mirza and given to Suleiman Khani Afshar, a man of acknowledged firmness and of great influence, not only in his own tribe, one of the noblest in Persia, but throughout the military circles who knew him and held him in high esteem. He was given the most rigorous orders. From Comte de Gobineau's Les religions et les philosophies dans l'Asie centrale, pages 183 to 184. This lull enabled a number of the companions to emerge occasionally from their stronghold and gather such grass as they could find in the field as the only means wherewith to allay their hunger. The flesh of horses, even the leather of their saddles, had been consumed by these hard-pressed companions. They boiled the grass and devoured it with piteous avidity. Another footnote says, Abdul-Baha refers, in the Memorials of the Faithful, pages 16 to 17, to the hardships and sufferings endured by the heroic defenders of the fort of Sheikh Tabasi. He pays a glowing tribute to the constancy, the zeal, and courage of the besieged, mentioning in particular Mullah Sadiq-i-Muqaddas. For 18 days, he says, they remained without food. They lived on the leather of their shoes. This too was soon consumed, and they had nothing left but water. They drank a mouthful every morning and lay famished and exhausted in their fort. When attacked, however, they would instantly spring to their feet and manifest in the face of the enemy a magnificent courage and astonishing resistance. Under such circumstances, to maintain an unwavering faith and patience is extremely difficult, and to endure such dire afflictions a rare phenomenon. Those who remained firm had already consumed not only all their food supply, but such grass as they could find in the enclosure and the bark of all the trees. There remained only the leather of their belts and the scabbards of their swords. They had to resort to the expedient recommended by the Spanish ambassador to the soldiers of the League besieged in Paris. They ground the bones of the dead and made flour with the dust thereof. At last, desperate, they were reduced to perpetrate a sort of profanation. The horse of Mullah Hussein had died of the wounds suffered during that fatal night which witnessed the death of its master. The Babis had buried it out of regard for their holy leader, and a little of the deep veneration which all felt for him hovered over the grave of the poor animal. They held council, and deploring the necessity for such a discussion, they debated the question whether extreme distress could justify them to disinter the sacred charger and eat the remains. With deep sorrow they agreed that the deed was justifiable. They cooked the remains of the horse with the flour made from the bones of the dead. They ate this strange mixture and took up their guns once more. From Comte Gobineau's Les religions et les philosophies dans l'Asie centrale, pages 186 to 187. As their strength declined, as they languished exhausted within the walls of their fort, Qurus multiplied his visits to them and endeavoured by his words of cheer and of hope to lighten the load of their agony. The month of Jamadi Youth Thani, 24th of April to the 23rd of May, AD 1849, had just begun when the artillery of the enemy was heard again discharging its showers of balls upon the fort. Simultaneously with the booming of the cannons, a detachment of the army, headed by a number of officers and consisting of several regiments of infantry and cavalry, rushed to storm it. The sound of their approach impelled Qurus to summon promptly his valiant lieutenant, Mirza Muhammad Baqir, and bid him emerge with 36 of his companions and repulse their attack. "Never since our occupation of this fort," he added, "have we, under any circumstances, attempted to direct any offensive against our opponents. Not until they unchained their attack upon us did we arise to defend our lives. Had we cherished the ambition of waging holy war against them, had we harbored the least intention of achieving ascendancy through the power of our arms over the unbelievers, we should not until this day have remained besieged within these walls. The forces of our arms would have by now, as was the case with the companions of Muhammad in days past, convulsed the nations of the earth and prepared them for the acceptance of our message. Such is not the way, however, which we have chosen to tread. Ever since we repaired to this fort, our sole, our unalterable purpose has been the vindication, by our deeds, and by our readiness to shed our blood in the path of our faith, of the exalted character of our mission. The hour is fast approaching, and we shall be able to consummate this task." Mirza Muhammad Baqir once more leaped on horseback and, with the 36 companions whom he had selected, confronted and scattered the forces which had beset him. He carried with him, as he re-entered the gate, the banner which an alarmed enemy had abandoned as soon as the reverberating cry of "Ya Sahibus Saman" had been raised. 5 of his companions suffered martyrdom in the course of that engagement, all of whom he bore to the fort and interred in one tomb close to the resting place of their fallen brethren. Prince Mehdi Quli Mirza, astounded by this further evidence of the inexhaustible vitality of his opponents, took counsel with the chiefs of his staff, urging them to devise such means as would enable him to bring that costly enterprise to a speedy end. For 3 days he deliberated with them, and finally came to the conclusion that the most advisable course to take would be to suspend all manner of hostilities for a few days, in the hope that the besieged, exhausted with hunger and goaded by despair, would decide to emerge from their retreat and submit to an unconditional surrender. As the prince was waiting for the consummation of the plan he had conceived, there arrived from Tehran a messenger bearing to him the farman of his sovereign. This man was a resident of the village of Kand, a place not far from the capital. He succeeded in obtaining leave from the prince to enter the fort and attempt to induce two of its occupants, Mullah Mihdi and his brother Mullah Bakir-i Kandi, to escape from the imminent danger to which their lives were exposed. As he approached its walls, he called the sentinels and asked them to inform Mullah Mihdi-i Kandi that an acquaintance of his desired to see him. Mullah Mihdi reported the matter to Qudus, who permitted him to meet his friend. I have heard Ake-i Kalim give the following account, as related to him by that same messenger whom he met in Tehran. I saw, the messenger informed me, Mullah Mihdi appear above the wall of the fort, his countenance revealing an expression of stern resolve that baffled description. He looked as fierce as a lion. His sword was girded on over a long white shirt, after the manner of the Arabs, and he had a white kerchief around his head. "What is it that you seek?" he impatiently inquired. "Say it quickly, for I fear that my master will summon me and find me absent." The determination that glowed in his eyes confused me. I was dumbfounded at his looks and manner. The thought suddenly flashed through my mind that I would awaken a dormant sentiment in his heart. I reminded him of his infant child, Rahman, whom he had left behind in the village in his eagerness to enlist under the standard of Mullah Hussein. In his great affection for the child, he had specially composed a poem which he chanted as he rocked his cradle and lulled him to sleep. "Your beloved Rahman," I said, "longs for the affection which you once lavished upon him. He is alone and forsaken and yearns to see you." "Tell him from me," was the father's instant reply, "that the love of the true Rahman, a love that transcends all earthly affections, has so filled my heart that it has left no place for any other love besides his." A footnote here says of the word Rahman, reference to God, the word Rahman meaning merciful. The poignancy with which he uttered these words brought tears to my eyes. "Accursed," I indignantly exclaimed, "be those who consider you and your fellow disciples as having strayed from the path of God." "What," I asked him, "if I venture to enter the fort and join you?" "If your motive be to seek and find the truth," he calmly replied, "I will gladly show you the way. And if you seek to visit me as an old and lifelong friend, I will accord you the welcome of which the Prophet of God has spoken, 'Welcome your guests, though they be of the infidels.' I will, faithful to that injunction, offer you the boiled grass and the churned bones which serve as my meat, the best I can procure for you. But if your intention be to harm me, I warn you that I will defend myself and will hurl you from the heights of these walls to the ground." His unswerving obstinacy convinced me of the futility of my efforts. I could feel that he was fired with such enthusiasm that, were the divines of the realm to assemble and endeavor to dissuade him from the course he had chosen to pursue, he would, alone and unaided, baffle their efforts. Neither, was I convinced, could all the potentates of the earth succeed in luring him away from the beloved of his heart's desire. "May the cup," I was moved to say, "which your lips have tasted bring you all the blessings you seek. The prince," I added, "has vowed that whoever steps out of this fort will be secure from danger, that he will even receive a safe passage from him, as well as whatever expenses he may require for the journey to his home." He promised to convey the prince's message to his fellow companions. "Is there anything further you wish to tell me?" he added. "I am impatient to join my master." "May God," I replied, "assist you in accomplishing your purpose." "He has indeed assisted me," he burst forth in exultation. "How else could I have been delivered from the darkness of my prison home in Kand? How could I have reached this exalted stronghold?" No sooner had he uttered these words than, turning his face away from me, he vanished from my sight. As soon as he had joined his companions, Mullah Mihdi conveyed the prince's message to them. On the afternoon of that same day, Syed Mirza Hussein-i Mutawalli, accompanied by his servant, left the fort and went directly to join the prince in his camp. The next day, Rasul-i Banamiri and a few others of his companions, unable to resist the ravages of famine and encouraged by the explicit assurances of the prince, sadly and reluctantly separated themselves from their friends. No sooner had they stepped out of the fort than they were all instantly slain at the order of Abbas Quli Khan-i Larijani. During the days that elapsed after that incident, the enemy, still encamped in the neighborhood of the fort, refrained from any act of hostility towards Qudus and his companions. On Wednesday morning, the 16th of Jamadiyuth Thani, the 9th of May, A.D. 1849, an emissary of the prince arrived at the fort and requested that 2 representatives be delegated by the besieged to conduct confidential negotiations with them, in the hope of arriving at a peaceful settlement of the issues outstanding between them. Accordingly, Qudus instructed Mullah Yusuf-i Ardibili and Syed Rizai-i Khurasani to act as his representatives and bade them inform the prince of his readiness to accede to his wish. Mehdi Kuli Mirza courteously received them and invited them to partake of the tea which he had prepared. "We should," they said, as they declined his offer, "feel it to be an act of disloyalty on our part, were we to partake of either meat or drink whilst our beloved leader languishes worn and famished in the fort." "The hostilities between us," the prince remarked, "have been unduly prolonged. We, on both sides, have fought long and suffered grievously. It is my fervent wish to achieve an amicable settlement of our differences." He took hold of a copy of the Koran that lay beside him and wrote, with his own hand, in confirmation of his statement, the following words on the margin of the opening surah: "I swear by this most holy book, by the righteousness of God who has revealed it, and the mission of him who was inspired with its verses, that I cherish no other purpose than to promote peace and friendliness between us. Come forth from your stronghold, and rest assured that no hand will be stretched forth against you. You yourself and your companions, I solemnly declare, are under the sheltering protection of the Almighty, of Muhammad, his prophet, and of Nasiruddin Shah, our sovereign. I pledge my honor that no man, either in this army or in this neighborhood, will ever attempt to assail you. The malediction of God, the omnipotent avenger, rest upon me if in my heart I cherish any other desire than that which I have stated." He affixed his seal to this statement, and delivering the Koran into the hands of Mullah Yusuf, asked him to convey his greetings to his leader, and to present him this formal and written assurance. "I will," he added, "in pursuance of my declaration, dispatch to the gate of the fort this very afternoon a number of horses which I trust he and his leading companions will accept and mount, in order to ride to the neighborhood of this camp, where a special tent will have been pitched for their reception. I would request them to be our guests until such time as I shall be able to arrange for their return, at my expense, to their homes." Qudus received the Koran from the hand of his messenger, kissed it reverently, and said, "O our Lord, decide between us and between our people with truth, for the best to decide art thou." Quotation from the Koran 788. Immediately after, he bade the rest of his companions prepare themselves to leave the fort. "By our response to their invitation," he told them, "we shall enable them to demonstrate the sincerity of their intentions." As the hour of their departure approached, Qudus attired his head with the green turban which the Bab had sent to him at the time he sent the one that Mullah Hussein wore on the day of his martyrdom. At the gate of the fort, they mounted the horses which had been placed at their disposal, Qudus mounting the favourite steed of the prince which the latter had sent for his use. His chief companions, among whom were a number of Seyyids and learned divines, rode behind him and were followed by the rest, who marched on foot, carrying with them all that was left of their arms and belongings. As the company, who were 202 in number, reached the tent which the prince had ordered to be pitched for Qudus in the vicinity of the public bath of the village of Dizva, overlooking the camp of the enemy, they alighted and proceeded to occupy their lodgings in the neighborhood of that tent. Soon after their arrival, Qudus emerged from his tent and, gathering together his companions, addressed them in these words: "You should show forth exemplary renunciation, for such behavior on your part will exalt our cause and redound to its glory. Anything short of complete detachment will but serve to tarnish the purity of its name and to obscure its splendor. Pray the Almighty to grant that even to your last hour he may graciously assist you to contribute your share to the exaltation of his faith." A few hours after sunset, they were served with dinner brought from the camp of the prince. The food that was offered them in separate trays, each of which was assigned to a group of 30 companions, was poor and scanty. 9 of us, those who were with Qudus subsequently related, were summoned by our leader to partake of the dinner which had been served in his tent. As he refused to taste it, we too, following his example, refrained from eating. The attendants who waited upon us were delighted to partake of the dishes which we had refused to touch, and devoured their contents with appreciation and avidity. A few of the companions who were dining outside the tent were heard remonstrating with the attendants, pleading that they were willing to buy from them at however exorbitant a price the bread which they needed. Qudus strongly disapproved of their conduct and rebuked them for the request they had made. But for the intercession of Mirza Muhammad Baqir, he would have severely punished them for having so completely disregarded his earnest exhortations. At daybreak a messenger arrived, summoning Mirza Muhammad Baqir to the presence of the prince. With the consent of Qudus, he responded to that invitation and returned an hour later, informing his chief that the prince had, in the presence of Suleiman Khan-i-Afshar, reiterated the assurances he had given, and had treated him with great consideration and kindness. "My oath," he assured me, Mirza Muhammad Baqir explained, "is irrevocable and sacred." He cited the case of Jafar Quli Khan, who, notwithstanding his shameless massacre of thousands of soldiers of the imperial army in the course of the insurrection fomented by the Salah, was pardoned by his sovereign and promptly invested with fresh honours by Muhammad Shah. Tomorrow the prince intends me to accompany you in the morning to the public bath, from whence he will proceed to your tent, after which he will provide the horses required to convey the entire company to Sangsar, from where they will disperse, some returning to their homes in Iraq, and others proceeding to Khorasan. At the request of Suleiman Khan, who urged that the presence of such a large gathering at such a fortified centre as Sangsar would be fraught with risk, the prince decided that the parties should disperse instead at Firuzkool. I am of the opinion that what his tongue professes his heart does not believe at all. Qudus, who shared his view, bade his companions disperse that very night, and stated that he himself would soon proceed to Bafurush. They hastened to implore him not to separate himself from them, and begged to be allowed to continue to enjoy the blessings of his companionship. He counselled them to be calm and patient, and assured them that whatever afflictions the future might yet reveal, they would meet again. "Weep not," were his parting words. "The reunion which will follow this separation will be such as shall eternally endure. We have committed our cause to the care of God. Whatever be his will and pleasure, the same we joyously accept." The prince failed to redeem his promise. Instead of joining Qudus in his tent, he called him with several of his companions to his headquarters, and informed him, as soon as they reached the tent of the Farash Bashi, that he himself would summon him at noon to his presence. Shortly after, a number of the prince's attendants went and told the rest of the companions that Qudus permitted them to join him at the army's headquarters. Several of them were deceived by this report, were made captives, and were eventually sold as slaves. These unfortunate victims constitute the remnants of the companions of the fort of Sheikh Tabasi, who survived that heroic struggle and were spared to transmit to their countrymen the woeful tale of their sufferings and trials. Soon after, the prince's attendants brought pressure to bear upon Mullah Yusuf to inform the remainder of his companions of the desire of Qudus that they immediately disarm. "What is it that you will tell them exactly?" they asked him, as he was being conducted to a place at some distance from the army's headquarters. "I will," was the bold reply, "warn them that whatever be henceforth the nature of the message you choose to deliver to them on behalf of their leader, that message is naught but downright falsehood." These words had hardly escaped his lips when he was mercilessly put to death. From this savage act they turned their attention to the fort, plundered it of its contents, and proceeded to bombard and demolish it completely. They then immediately encompassed the remaining companions and opened fire upon them. Any who escaped the bullets were killed by the swords of the officers and the spears of their men. In the very throes of death, these unconquerable heroes were still heard to utter the words, "Holy, holy, O Lord our God, Lord of the angels and the spirit! words which in moments of exultation had fallen from their lips, and which they now repeated with undiminished fervour at this crowning hour of their lives. As soon as these atrocities had been perpetrated, the prince ordered those who had been retained as captives to be ushered one after another into his presence. Those among them who were men of recognized standing, such as the father of Badi, Mullah Mirza Muhammad-i Furugi, and Haji Nazir-i Qazvini, he charged his attendants to conduct to Tehran and obtain in return for their deliverance a ransom from each one of them in direct proportion to their capacity and wealth. As to the rest, he gave orders to his executioners that they be immediately put to death. A few were cut to pieces with the sword, others were torn asunder, a number were bound to trees and riddled with bullets, and still others were blown from the mouths of cannons and consigned to the flames. This terrible butchery had hardly been concluded when 3 of the companions of Qudus, who were residents of Sangsar, were ushered into the presence of the prince. One of them was Syed Ahmad, whose father, Mir Muhammad Ali, a devoted admirer of Sheikh Ahmad-i-Asai, had been a man of great learning and distinguished merit. He, accompanied by the same Syed Ahmad and his brother Mir Abul Kazim, who met his death the very night on which Mullah Hussein was slain, had departed for Kabila in the year preceding the declaration of the Bab, with the intention of introducing his 2 sons to Syed Kazim. Ere his arrival, the Syed had departed this life. He immediately determined to leave for Najaf. While in that city, the Prophet Muhammad one night appeared to him in a dream, bidding the Imam Ali, the commander of the faithful, announce to him that after his death both his sons, Syed Ahmad and Mir Abul Kazim, would attain the presence of the promised Qaim, and would each suffer martyrdom in his path. As soon as he awoke, he called for his son, Syed Ahmad, and acquainted him with his will and last wishes. On the 7th day after that dream, he died. In Sangsar, 2 other persons, Kabilai Ali and Kabilai Abu Muhammad, both known for their piety and spiritual insight, strove to prepare the people for the acceptance of the promised revelation, the advent of which they felt was fast approaching. In the year 1264 AH, AD 1847-8, they publicly announced that in that very year a man named Syed Ali would, preceded by a black standard and accompanied by a number of his chosen companions, set forth from Khorasan and proceed to Mazindaran. They urged every loyal adherent of Islam to arise and lend him every possible assistance. The standard which he will hoist, they declared, will be none other than the standard of the promised Qaim. He who will unfurl it, none other than his lieutenant and chief promoter of his cause. Whoso follows him will be saved, and he who turns away will be among the fallen. Kabilai Abu Muhammad urged his 2 sons, Abul Kazim and Muhammad Ali, to arise for the triumph of the new revelation, and to sacrifice every material consideration for the attainment of that end. Both Kabilai Abu Muhammad and Kabilai Ali died in the spring of that same year. These 2 sons of Kabilai Abu Muhammad were the 2 companions who had been ushered together with Syed Ahmad into the presence of the prince. Mullah Zainul Abidin Isha Mirzadi, one of the trusted and learned counsellors of the government, acquainted the prince with their story and related the experiences and activities of their respective fathers. For what reason, Syed Ahmad was asked, have you chosen to tread a path that has involved you and your kinsman in such circumstances of wretchedness and disgrace? Could you not have been satisfied with the vast number of erudite and illustrious divines who are to be found in this land and in Iraq? My faith in this cause, he fearlessly retorted, is born not of idle imitation. I have dispassionately inquired into its precepts, and am convinced of its truth. When in Najaf, I ventured to request the preeminent mujtahid of that city, Sheikh Muhammad Hassan-i Najafi, to expound for me certain truths connected with the secondary principles underlying the teachings of Islam. He refused to accede to my request. I reiterated my appeal, whereupon he angrily rebuked me and persisted in his refusal. How can I, in the light of such experience, be expected to seek enlightenment on the abstruse articles of the faith of Islam from a divine, however illustrious, who refuses to answer my question on such simple and ordinary matters, and who expresses his indignation at my having put such questions to him." "What is your belief concerning Haji Muhammad Ali?" asked the prince. "We believe," he replied, "Mullah Hussein to have been the bearer of the standard of which Muhammad has spoken. Should your eyes behold the black standards proceeding from Khorasan, hasten ye towards them, even though ye should have to crawl over the snow. For this reason we have renounced the world and have flocked to his standard, a standard which is but a symbol of our faith. If you wish to bestow upon me a favor, bid your executioner put an end to me and enable me to be gathered to the company of my immortal companions. For the world and all its charms have ceased to allure me. I long to depart this life and return to my God." The prince, who was reluctant to take the life of the Seyyid, refused to order his execution. His two companions, however, were immediately put to death. He, with his brother Seyyid Abu Talib, was delivered into the hands of Mullah Zainul Abidin, who was instructed to conduct them to Sarsang. Meanwhile, Mirza Muhammad Taqi, accompanied by 7 of the ulamas of Sari, set out from that town to share in the meritorious act of inflicting the punishment of death upon the companions of Qudus. When they found that they had already been put to death, Mirza Muhammad Taqi urged the prince to reconsider his decision and to order the immediate execution of Sayyid Ahmad, pleading that his arrival at Sari would be the signal for fresh disturbances as grave as those which had already afflicted them. The prince eventually yielded on the express condition that he be regarded as his guest until his own arrival at Sari, at which time he would take whatever measures were required to prevent him from disturbing the peace of the neighborhood. No sooner had Mirza Muhammad Taqi taken the direction of Sari than he proceeded to vilify Sayyid Ahmad and his father. "Why ill-treat a guest," his captive pleaded, "whom the prince has committed to your charge? Why ignore the Prophet's injunction, 'Honor thy guest, though he be an infidel'?" Roused to a burst of fury, Mirza Muhammad Taqi, together with his 7 companions, drew their swords and cut his body to pieces. With his last breath, Sayyid Ahmad was heard invoking the aid of the Sahibus Saman. As to his brother, Sayyid Abu Talib, he was safely conducted to Sarsang by Mullah Zainul Abidin, and to this day resides with his brother Sayyid Muhammad Riza in Mazindaran. Both are engaged in the service of the cause and are accounted among its active supporters. As soon as his work was completed, the prince, accompanied by Qudus, returned to Bafarush. They arrived on Friday afternoon, the 18th of Jamadiyuth Thani, the 11th of May, AD 1849. The Sayyidul Ulama, together with the ulamas of the town, came out to welcome the prince and to extend their congratulations on his triumphal return. The whole town was beflagged to celebrate the victory, and the bonfires which blazed at night witnessed to the joy with which a grateful population greeted the return of the prince. 3 days of festivities elapsed, during which he gave no indication as to his intention regarding the fate of Qudus. He vacillated in his policy and was extremely reluctant to ill-treat his captive. He at first refused to allow the people to gratify their feelings of unrelenting hatred, and was able to restrain their fury. He had originally intended to conduct him to Tehran, and by delivering him into the hands of his sovereign, to relieve himself of the responsibility which weighed upon him. The Sayyidul Ulama's unquestionable hostility, however, interfered with the execution of this plan. The hatred with which Qudus and his cause inspired him blazed into furious rage as he witnessed the increasing evidences of the prince's inclination to allow so formidable an opponent to slip from his grasp. Day and night he remonstrated with him, and every cunning that his resourceful brain could devise sought to dissuade him from pursuing a policy which he thought to be at once disastrous and cowardly. In the fury of his despair, he appealed to the mob and sought, by inflaming their passions, to awaken the basest sentiments of revenge in their hearts. The whole of Bafarush had been aroused by the persistency of his call. His diabolical skill soon won him the sympathy and support of the masses. "I have vowed," he imperiously protested, "to deny myself both food and sleep until such a time as I am able to end the life of Haji Muhammad Ali with my own hands." The threats of an agitated multitude reinforced his plea and succeeded in arousing the apprehensions of the prince. Fearing that his own life might be endangered, he summoned to his presence the leading ulamas of Baha'u'llah for the purpose of consulting as to the measures that should be taken to allay the tumult of popular excitement. All those who had been invited responded, with the exception of Mullah Muhammad-i Hamzi, who pleaded to be excused from attending that meeting. He had previously, on several occasions, endeavoured, during the siege of the fort, to persuade the people to refrain from violence. To him, Qudus, a few days before his abandonment of the fort, had committed, through one of his trusted companions of Mazindaran, a locked saddlebag containing the text of his own interpretation of the Sa'd of Samad, as well as all his other writings and papers that he had in his possession, the fate of which remains unknown until the present day. No sooner had the ulamas assembled than the prince gave orders for Qudus to be brought into their presence. Since the day of his abandoning the fort, Qudus, who had been delivered into the custody of the Farash Bashi, had not been summoned to his presence. As soon as he arrived, the prince arose and invited him to be seated by his side. Turning to the Sayyidul Ulama, he urged that his conversations with him be dispassionately and conscientiously conducted. Your discussions, he asserted, must revolve around and be based upon the verses of the Quran and the traditions of Muhammad, by which means alone you can demonstrate the truth or falsity of your contentions. For what reason, the Sayyidul Ulama impertinently inquired, have you, by choosing to place a green turban upon your head, arrogated yourself to a right which only he who is a true descendant of the Prophet can claim? Do you not know that whoso defies this sacred tradition is accursed of God? Wasid Murtaza, Qudus calmly replied, whom all the recognized ulamas praise and esteem, a descendant of the Prophet through his father or his mother. One of those present at the gathering instantly declared the mother alone to have been a Sayyid. Why then object to me, retorted Qudus, since my mother was always recognized by the inhabitants of this town as a lineal descendant of the Imam Hassan? Was she not, because of her descent, honored, nay, venerated by every one of you? No one dared to contradict him. The Sayyidul Ulama burst forth into a fit of indignation and despair. Angrily he flung his turban to the ground and arose to leave the meeting. This man, he thundered ere he departed, has succeeded in proving to you that he is a descendant of the Imam Hassan. He will ere long justify his claim to be the mouthpiece of God and the revealer of his will. The prince was moved to make this declaration. I wash my hands of all responsibility for any harm that may befall this man. You are free to do what you like with him. You will yourselves be answerable to God on the day of judgment. Immediately after he had spoken these words, he called for his horse and, accompanied by his attendants, departed for Sari. Intimated by the imprecations of the ulamas, and forgetful of his oath, he abjectly surrendered Qudus to the hands of an unrelenting foe, those ravening wolves who panted for the moment when they could pounce with uncontrolled violence upon their prey and let loose on him the fiercest passions of revenge and hate. No sooner had the prince freed them from the restraints which he had exercised, and the ulamas and the people of Baha'u'llah, acting under the orders from the Sayyidul Ulama, arose to perpetrate upon the body of their victim acts of such atrocious cruelty as no pen can describe. By the testimony of Baha'u'llah, that heroic youth, who was still on the threshold of his life, was subjected to such tortures and suffered such a death as even Jesus had not faced in the hour of his greatest agony. The absence of any restraint on the part of the government authorities, the ingenious barbarity which the torture-mongers of Baha'u'llah so ably displayed, the fierce fanaticism which glowed in the breasts of its Shia inhabitants, the moral support accorded to them by the dignitaries of church and state in the capital, above all, the acts of heroism which their victim and his companions had accomplished, and which had served to heighten their exasperation, all combined to nerve the hand of the assailant and to add to the diabolical ferocity which characterized his martyrdom. Such were the circumstances that the Bab, who was then confined in the castle of Shirik, was unable for a period of 6 months either to write or to dictate. The deep grief which he felt had stilled the voice of revelation and silenced his pen. How deeply he mourned his loss! What cries of anguish he must have uttered as the tale of the siege, the untold sufferings, the shameless betrayal, and the wholesale massacre of the companions of Sheikh Tabasi reached his ears and was unfolded before his eyes. What pangs of sorrow he must have felt when he learned of the shameful treatment which his beloved Qudus had undergone in his hour of martyrdom at the hands of the people of Bafarush. How he was stripped of his clothes, how the turban which he, the Bab, had bestowed upon him had been befouled, how, barefooted, bareheaded, and loaded with chains, he was paraded through the streets, followed and scorned by the entire population of the town, how he was execrated and spat upon by the howling mob, how he was assailed with knives and axes of the scum of its female inhabitants, how his body was pierced and mutilated, and how eventually it was delivered to the flames. Amidst his torments, Qudus was heard whispering forgiveness to his foes. "Forgive, O my God," he cried, "the trespasses of this people. Deal with them in thy mercy, for they know not what we have already discovered and cherished. I have striven to show them the path that leads to their salvation. Behold how they have arisen to overwhelm and kill me. Show them, O God, the way of truth, and turn their ignorance into faith." In his hour of agony, the Sayyid-i Qumi, who had so treacherously deserted the fort, was seen passing by his side. Observing his helplessness, he smote him in the face. "You claimed," he cried in haughty scorn, "that your voice was the voice of God. If you speak the truth, burst your bonds asunder, and free yourself from the hands of your enemies." Qudus looked steadfastly into his face, sighed deeply, and said, "May God requite you for your deed, inasmuch as you have helped to add to the measure of my afflictions." Approaching the Sabsi Maidan, he raised his voice and said, "Would that my mother were with me, and could see with her own eyes the splendors of my nuptials." He had scarcely spoken these words when the enraged multitude fell upon him, and tearing his body to pieces, threw the scattered members into the fire which they had kindled for that purpose. In the middle of the night, what still remained of the fragments of that burned and mutilated body was gathered by the hand of a devoted friend and interred in a place not far distant from the scene of his martyrdom. And a footnote here says, "He who knew Qudus and who made the pilgrimage with him is the one upon whom 8 unities have passed, and God honored him among his angels in the heavens, because of the way in which he had withdrawn himself from all, and because he was without blame in the sight of God." From the Persian Bayan, Volume 2, page 164. The footnote continues, "Yet more wonderful than the events above described is the account of them given by Abbas Quli Khan, with many expressions of admiration to Prince Ahmad Mirza. The late Haji Mirza Jani writes, About 2 years after the disaster of Sheikh Tabasi, I heard one who, though not a believer, was honest, truthful, and worthy of credit, relate as follows. We were sitting together, and some allusion was made to the war waged by some of those present against Hazrat-i Qudus and Jinab-i Babul Bab. Prince Ahmad Mirza and Abbas Quli Khan were amongst the company. The prince questioned Abbas Quli Khan about the matter, and he replied thus, The truth of the matter is that anyone who had not seen Karbala would, if he had seen Tabasi, not only have comprehended what there took place, but would have ceased to consider it, and had he seen Mullah Hussein of Bafarush, he would have been convinced that the chief of martyrs had returned to earth, and had he witnessed my deeds, he would assuredly have said, This is Shimir, come back with sword and lance. I swear by the sacred plume of His Majesty, the center of the universe, that one day Mullah Hussein, having on his head a green turban and over his shoulder a shroud, came forth from the castle, stood forth in the open field, and leaning on a lance which he held in his hand, said, O people, why, without inquiry, and under the influence of passion and prejudiced misrepresentation, do ye act so cruelly towards us, and strive without cause to shed innocent blood? Be ashamed before the Creator of the universe, and at least give us passage, that we may depart out of this land. Seeing that the soldiers were moved, I opened fire, and ordered the troops to shout so as to drown his voice. Again I saw him lean on his lance, and heard him cry, Is there any who will help me? 3 times, so that all heard him cry. At that moment all the soldiers were silent, and some began to weep, and many of the horsemen were visibly affected. Fearing that the army might be seduced from their allegiance, I again ordered them to fire and shout. Then I saw Mullah Hussein unsheath his sword, raise his face towards heaven, and heard him exclaim, "O God, I have completed the proof to this host, but it availeth not." Then he began to attack us on the right and on the left. I swear by God that on that day he wielded the sword in such wise as transcends the power of man. Only the horsemen of Mazindaran held their ground and refused to flee, and when Mullah Hussein was well warmed to the fray, he overtook a fugitive soldier. The soldier sheltered himself behind a tree, and further strove to shield himself with his musket. Mullah Hussein dealt him such a blow with his sword that he clave him and the tree and the musket into 6 pieces. And during all that war, not once was his sword stroke at fault, but every blow that he struck fell true. And by the nature of their wounds I could recognize all whom Mullah Hussein had cut down with his sword, and since I had heard and knew that none could rightly wield the sword save the chief of believers, and that it was well nigh impossible for sword to cut so true, therefore I forbade all who were aware of this thing to mention it or to make it known, lest the troops should be discouraged and should wax faint in the fight. But in truth I know not what had been shown to these people, or what they had seen, that they came forth to battle with such alacrity and joy, and engaged so eagerly and gladly in the strife, without displaying in their countenances any trace of fear or apprehension. One would imagine that in their eyes the keen sword and blood-spilling dagger were but means to the attainment of everlasting life, and so eagerly did their necks and bosoms welcome them as they circled like salamanders round the fiery hail of bullets. And the astonishing thing was that all these men were scholars and men of learning, sedentary recluses of the college and the cloister, delicately nurtured and of weakly frame, inured indeed to austerities, but strangers to the roar of cannon, the rattle of musketry, and the field of battle. During the last 3 months of the siege, moreover, they were absolutely without bread and water, and were reduced to the extreme of weakness through lack of even such pittance of food as is sufficient to sustain life. Notwithstanding this, it seemed as if in time of battle a new spirit were breathed into their frames, insomuch that the imagination of men cannot conceive the vehemence of their courage and valor. They used to expose their bodies to the bullets and cannonballs not only fearlessly and courageously, but eagerly and joyously, seeming to regard the battlefield as a banquet, and to be bent on casting away their lives. From the Tarikh-i-Jadid, pages 106 to 109. It would be appropriate at this juncture to place on record the names of those martyrs who participated in the defense of the fort of Sheikh Tabasi, in the hope that generations yet to come may recall with pride and gratitude the names, no less than the deeds, of those pioneers who, by their life and death, have so greatly enriched the annals of God's immortal faith. Such names as I have been able to collect from various sources, and for which I am particularly indebted to Ismulahul Mim, Ismulahul Javad, and Ismulahul Asad, I now proceed to enumerate, trusting that even as in the world beyond their souls have been invested with the light of unfading glory, their names may likewise linger forever on the tongues of men, that their mention may continue to evoke a like spirit of enthusiasm and devotion in the hearts of those to whom this priceless heritage has been transmitted. From my informants, I not only have been able to gather the names of most of those who fell in the course of that memorable siege, but have also succeeded in obtaining a representative, though incomplete, list of all those martyrs who, from the year 1260, that is AD 1844, until the present day, the latter part of the month of Rabiul Awwal in the year AH 1306, that is November to December AD 1888, have laid down their lives in the path of the cause of God. It is my intention to make mention of each of these names in connection with a particular event with which it is chiefly connected. As to those who quaffed the cup of martyrdom while defending the fort of Tabasi, their names are as follows. First and foremost among them stand Qudus, upon whom the Bab bestowed the name Ismulahul Akhar. A footnote says literally meaning the last name of God. He, the last letter of the living, and the Bab's chosen companion on his pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina was, together with Mullah Sadiq and Mullah Ali Akbar-i Ardistani, the first to suffer persecution on Persian soil for the sake of the cause of God. He was only 18 years of age when he left his native town of Bafurush for Karbala. For about 4 years he sat at the feet of Sayyid Qasim, and at the age of 22 met and recognized his beloved in Shiraz. 5 years later, on the 23rd of Jamadiyuth Thani in the year AH 1265, the 16th of May AD 1849, he was destined to fall in the Sabzi Maidan of Bafurush, a victim of the most refined and wanton barbarity at the hands of the enemy. The Bab, and at a later time Baha'u'llah, have mourned in unnumbered tablets and prayers his loss, and have lavished on him their eulogies. Such was the honor accorded to him by Baha'u'llah that in his commentary on the verse of Kulut Ta'am, footnote here says literally the last point, which he, Baha'u'llah, revealed while in Baghdad, he conferred upon him the unrivaled station of the Nukti-i-Ukra, a station second to none except that of the Bab himself. And a footnote of Nukti-i-Ukra is from the Quran, 393. Mullah Hussein, surnamed the Babul Bab, the first to recognize and embrace the new revelation. At the age of 18, he too departed from his native town of Bushrui in Khurasan for Karbala, and for a period of 9 years remained closely associated with Sayyid Qasim. 4 years prior to the declaration of the Bab, acting according to the instructions of Sayyid Qasim, he met in Isfahan the learned Mujtahid Sayyid Bakir-i Rashti, and in Mashhad Mirza Ashkari, to both of whom he delivered with dignity and eloquence the messages with which he had been entrusted by his leader. The circumstances attending his martyrdom evoked the Bab's inexpressible sorrow, a sorrow that found vent in eulogies and prayers of such great number as would be equivalent to thrice the volume of the Quran. In one of his visiting tablets, the Bab asserts that the very dust of the ground where the remains of Mullah Hussein lie buried is endowed with such potency as to bring joy to the disconsolate and healing to the sick. In the Kitab-i-Iqan, Baha'u'llah extols with still greater force the virtues of Mullah Hussein. But for him, he writes, God would not have been established upon the seat of his enemy, nor have ascended the throne of eternal glory. And third comes Mirza Muhammad Hassan, the brother of Mullah Hussein. And fourth, Mirza Muhammad Baqir, the nephew of Mullah Hussein. He, as well as Mirza Muhammad Hassan, accompanied Mullah Hussein from Bushrui to Karbala, and from thence to Shiraz, where they embraced the message of the Bab and were enrolled among the letters of the living. With the exception of the journey of Mullah Hussein to the castle of Maku, they continued to be with him until the time they suffered martyrdom in the fort of Tabasi. And fifth comes the brother-in-law of Mullah Hussein, the father of Mirza Abul Hassan and Mirza Muhammad Hussein, both of whom are now in Bushrui, and into whose hands the care of the Barakatul Firdaus, Mullah Hussein's sister, is committed. Both are firm and devoted adherents of the faith. Sixth, the son of Mullah Ahmad, the elder brother of Mullah Mirza Muhammad-i Furuti. He, unlike his uncle, Mullah Mirza Muhammad, suffered martyrdom and was, as testified by the latter, a youth of great piety and distinguished for his learning and his integrity of character. 7. Mirza Muhammad Baqir, known as Harati, though originally a resident of Qayin. He was a close relative of the father of Nabil-i-Akbar, and was the first in Mashhad to embrace the cause. It was he who built the Babiyye, and who devotedly served Qudus during his sojourn in that city. When Mullah Hussein hoisted the black standard, he, together with his child, Mirza Muhammad Qasim, eagerly enrolled under his banner and went forth with him to Mazindaran. That child was saved eventually, and has now grown up into a fervent and active supporter of the faith in Mashhad. It was Mirza Muhammad Baqir who acted as the standard-bearer of the company, who designed the plan of the fort, its walls and turrets, and the moat which surrounded it, who succeeded Mullah Hussein in organizing the forces of his companions and in leading the charge against the enemy, and who acted as the intimate companion, the lieutenant, and trusted counsellor of Qudus until the hour when he fell a martyr in the path of the cause. 8. Mirza Muhammad Taqi-i-Juvaini, a native of Sabzi-Fa, who was distinguished for his literary accomplishments and was often entrusted by Mullah Hussein with the task of leading the charge against the assailants. His head and that of his fellow companion Mirza Muhammad Baqir were impaled on spears and paraded through the streets of Bafarush amid the shouts and howling of an excited populace. 9. Kamba Ali, the fearless and faithful servant of Mullah Hussein, who accompanied him on his journey to Maku and who suffered martyrdom on the very night on which his master fell a victim to the bullets of the enemy. 10. Hassan, and 11. Kuli, who, together with a man named Iskandar, a native of Zanjan, bore the body of Mullah Hussein to the fort on the night of his martyrdom and placed it at the feet of Qudus. He it was, the same Hassan, who, by the orders of the chief constable of Mashhad, was led by a halter through the streets of that city. 12. Muhammad Hassan, the brother of Mullah Sadiq, whom the comrades of Khusraw slew on the way between Bafarush and the fort of Tabasi. He distinguished himself by his unwavering constancy and had been one of the servants of the shrine of the Imam Riza. 13. Syed Riza, who, with Mullah Yusuf-i Ardibili, was commissioned by Qudus to meet the prince, and who brought back with him the sealed copy of the Quran bearing the oath which the prince had written. He was one of the well-known Syeds of Khorasan and was recognized for his learning as well as for the integrity of his character. 14. Mullah Mardan Ali, one of the noted companions from Khorasan, a resident of the village of Miyameh, the site of a well-fortified fortress situated between Sabzivar and Shah Rud. He, together with 33 companions, enlisted under the banner of Mullah Hussein on the day of the latter's passage through that village. It was in the masjid of Miyameh, to which Mullah Hussein had repaired in order to offer the Friday congregational prayer, that he delivered his soul-stirring appeal, in which he laid stress upon the fulfillment of the tradition relating to the hoisting of the black standard in Khorasan, and in which he declared himself to be its bearer. His eloquent address profoundly impressed his hearers, so much so that on that very day the majority of those who heard him, most of whom were men of distinguished merit, arose and followed him. Only one of those 33 companions, a Mullah Isa, survived, whose sons are at present in the village of Miyameh, actively engaged in the service of the cause. The names of the martyred companions of that village are as follows: 15. Mullah Muhammad Mihdi. 16. Mullah Muhammad Jafar. 17. Mullah Muhammad ibn Mullah Muhammad. 18. Mullah Rahim. 19. Mullah Muhammad Riza. 20. Mullah Muhammad Hussein. 21. Mullah Muhammad. 22. Mullah Yusuf. 23. Mullah Yaqub. 24. Mullah Ali. 25. Mullah Zainul Abidin. 26. Mullah Muhammad, son of Mullah Zainul Abidin. 27. Mullah Baqir. 28. Mullah Abdul Muhammad. 29. Mullah Abul Hassan. 30. Mullah Ismail. 31. Mullah Abdul Ali. 32. Mullah Akka Baba. 33. Mullah Abdul Javad. 34. Mullah Muhammad Hussein. 35. Mullah Muhammad Baqir. 36. Mullah Muhammad. 37. Haji Hassan. 38. Kabilai Ali. 39. Mullah Kabilai Ali. 40. Kabilai Nur Muhammad. 41. Muhammad Ibrahim. 42. Muhammad Saim. 43. Muhammad Hazi. 44. Syed Mihdi. 45. Abu Muhammad. Of the companions of the village of Sarsang, which forms part of the district of Simnan, 18 were martyred. Their names are as follows: 46. Syed Ahmad, whose body was cut to pieces by Mirza Muhammad Taqi and the 7 ulamas of Sari. He was a noted divine and greatly esteemed for his eloquence and piety. 47. Mir Abul Qasim, Syed Ahmad's brother, who won the crown of martyrdom on the very night on which Mullah Hussein met his death. 48. Mir Mirti, the paternal uncle of Syed Ahmad. 49. Mir Ibrahim, the brother-in-law of Syed Ahmad. 50. Safar Ali, the son of Karbilai Ali, who, together with Karbilai Muhammad, had so strenuously endeavoured to awaken the people of Sarsang from their sleep of heedlessness. Both of them, owing to their infirmities, were unable to proceed to the fort of Dabasi. 51. Muhammad Ali, the son of Karbilai Abu Muhammad. 52. Abul Qasim, the brother of Muhammad Ali. 53. Karbilai Ibrahim. 54. Ali Ahmad. 55. Mullah Ali Akbar. 56. Mullah Hussein Ali. 57. Abbas Ali. 58. Hussein Ali. 59. Mullah Ali Asghar. 60. Karbilai Ismail. 61. Ali Khan. 62. Muhammad Ibrahim. 63. Abdul Azim. From the village of Shah Mirzad, 2 fell in defending the fort. 64. Mullah Abu Rahim, and 65. Karbilai Kazim. As to the adherents of the faith in Mazindaran, 27 martyrs have thus far been recorded. 66. Mullah Rizai Shah. 67. Azim. 68. Karbilai Muhammad Jafar. 69. Syed Hussein. 70. Muhammad Bakir. 71. Syed Razak. 72. Ustad Ibrahim. 73. Mullah Syed-i Ziri Kinari. 74. Rizai-i Arab. 75. Razul-i Bani Miri. 76. Muhammad Hussein, the brother of Razul Bani Miri. 77. Tahir. 78. Shafi. 79. Kazim. 80. Mullah Muhammad Jan. 81. Masih, the brother of Mullah Muhammad Jan. 82. Isa Baba. 83. Yusuf. 84. Fadlullah. 85. Baba. 86. Safi Kuli. 87. Nizam. 88. Ruhullah. 89. Ali Kuli. 90. Sultan. 91. Jafar. 92. Khalil. Of the believers of Savat Ku, the 5 following names have thus far been ascertained. 93. Karbilai Kamba Kalish. 94. Mullah Nad Ali-i Mutawali. 95. Abdul Haq. 96. Itabaki Chupan. 97. Son of Itabaki Chupan. From the town of Ardistan, the following have suffered martyrdom. 98. Mirza Ali Muhammad, son of Mirza Muhammad Said. 99. Mirza Abdul Vasi, son of Haji Abdul Wahab. 100. Muhammad Hussein, son of Haji Muhammad Sadiq. 101. Muhammad Mihdi, son of Haji Muhammad Ibrahim. 102. Mirza Ahmad, son of Muhsin. 103. Mirza Muhammad, son of Mir Muhammad Taqi. From the city of Isfahan, 30 have thus far been recorded. 104. Mullah Jafar, the sifter of wheat, whose name has been mentioned by the Bab in the Persian Bayan. 105. Ustad Akka, surnamed Buzurg Bana. 106. Ustad Hassan, son of Ustad Akka. 107. Ustad Muhammad, son of Ustad Akka. 108. Muhammad Hussein, son of Ustad Akka, whose younger brother Ustad Jafar was sold several times by his enemies until he reached his native city, where he now resides. 109. Ustad Qurban Ali Ibana. 110. Ali Akbar, son of Ustad Qurban Ali Ibana. 111. Abdullah, son of Ustad Qurban Ali Ibana. 112. Muhammad Bakir Naqsh, the maternal uncle of Syed Yahya, son of Mirza Muhammad Ali Nakhri. He was 14 years old and was martyred the very night that Mullah Hussein met his death. 113. Mullah Muhammad Taqi. 114. Mullah Muhammad Riza, both brothers of the late Abdus Salih, the gardener of the Rizvan ad-Akka. 115. Mullah Ahmad-i Safar. 116. Mullah Hussein-i Miskar. 117. Ahmad-i Peyvandi. 118. Hassan-i Shar Baf-i Yazdi. 119. Muhammad Taqi. 120. Muhammad Attar, brother of Hassan-i Shar Baf. 121. Mullah Abdul Khalik, who cut his throat in Badasht and whom Tahiri named Dabi. 122. Hussein. 123. Abul Qasim, brother of Hussein. 124. Mirza Muhammad Riza. 125. Mullah Haidar, brother of Mirza Muhammad Riza. 126. Mirza Mihdi. 127. Muhammad Ibrahim. 128. Muhammad Hussein, surnamed Dastmal Giri Zan. 129. Muhammad Hasi-i Chit Saz, a well-known cloth manufacturer who attained the presence of the Bab. 130. Muhammad Hussein-i Attar. 131. Ustad Haji Muhammad-i Banna. 132. Mahmud-i Mukhari, a noted cloth dealer. He was newly married and attained the presence of the Bab in Shirik. The Bab urged him to proceed to the Jaziri-i Qadra and to lend his assistance to Qudus. While in Tehran, he received a letter from his brother announcing the birth of a son and entreating him to hasten to Isfahan to see him, and then to proceed to whichever place he felt inclined. "I am too much fired," he replied, "with the love of this cause to be able to devote any attention to my son. I am impatient to join Qudus and to enlist under his banner." 133. Syed Muhammad Rizai-i Pa-Kali, a distinguished Syed and a highly esteemed divine, whose declared purpose to enlist under the banner of Mullah Hussein caused a great tumult among the ulamas of Isfahan. Among the believers of Shiraz, the following attained the station of martyrdom. 134. Mullah Abdullah, known also by the name of Mirza Salih. 135. Mullah Zainul Abidin. 136. Mirza Muhammad. Of the adherents of the faith in Yazd, only 4 have thus far been recorded. 137. The Syed who walked on foot all the way from Khorasan to Bafarush, where he fell a victim to the bullet of the enemy. 138. Syed Ahmad, the father of Syed Hussein-i Aziz, the amanuensis of the Bab. 139. Mirza Muhammad Ali, son of Syed Ahmad, whose head was blown off by the ball from a cannon as he was standing at the entrance of the fort, and who, because of his tender age, was greatly loved and admired by Qudus. 140. Sheikh Ali, son of Sheikh Abdul Khalik-i Yazdi, a resident of Mashhad, a youth whose enthusiasm and untiring energy were greatly praised by Mullah Hussein and Qudus. Of the believers of Qazvin, the following were martyred. 141. Mirza Muhammad Ali, a noted divine whose father, Haji Mullah Abdul Wahab, was one of the most distinguished mujtahids in Qazvin. He attained the presence of the Bab in Shiraz and was enrolled as one of the letters of the living. 142. Muhammad Hadi, a noted merchant, son of Haji Abdul Karim, surnamed Bakhban Bashi. 143. Syed Ahmad. 144. Mirza Abdul Jalil, a noted divine. 145. Mirza Mihdi. 146. From the village of Lahard, a man named Haji Muhammad Ali, who had greatly suffered as a result of the murder of Mullah Taqi in Qazvin. Of the believers of Kui, the following have suffered martyrdom. 147. Mullah Mihdi, a distinguished divine who had been one of the esteemed disciples of Sayyid Qasim. He was noted for his learning, his eloquence, and his staunchness of faith. 148. Mullah Mahmud-i Kui, brother of Mullah Mihdi, one of the letters of the living and a distinguished divine. 149. Mullah Yusuf-i Ardibili, one of the letters of the living, noted for his learning, his enthusiasm and eloquence. It was he who had aroused the apprehension of Haji Karim Khan on his arrival at Kirman, and who struck terror to the hearts of his adversaries. "This man," Haji Karim Khan was heard to say to his congregation, "must needs be expelled from this town, for if he be allowed to remain, he will assuredly cause the same tumult in Kirman as he has already done in Shiraz. The injury which he will inflict will be irreparable. The magic of his eloquence and the force of his personality, if they do not already excel those of Mullah Hussein, are certainly not inferior to them." By this means he was able to force him to curtail his stay in Kirman, and to prevent him from addressing the people from the pulpit. The Bab gave him the following instructions: "You must visit the towns and cities of Persia, and summon their inhabitants to the cause of God. On the first day of the month of Muharram, in the year AH 1265, the 27th of November, AD 1848, you must be in Mazindaran, and must arise to lend every assistance in your power to Qudus." Mullah Yusuf, faithful to the instructions of his master, refused to prolong his stay beyond a week in any of the towns and cities which he visited. On his arrival in Mazindaran, he was made captive by the forces of Prince Mihdi Quli Mirza, who immediately recognized him and gave orders that he be imprisoned. He was eventually released, as we have already observed, by the companions of Mullah Hussein on the day of the Battle of Vasqas. 150. Mullah Jalil-e-Urumi, one of the Letters of the Living, noted for his learning, his eloquence, and tenacity of faith. 151. Mullah Ahmad, a resident of Maraqi, one of the Letters of the Living, and a distinguished disciple of Sir Kazim. 152. Mullah Mihdi-e-Kandi, a close companion of Baha'u'llah, and a tutor to the children of his household. 153. Mullah Bakir, brother of Mullah Mihdi, both of whom were men of considerable learning, to whose great attainments Baha'u'llah testifies in the Kitab-i-Iqan. 154. Sir Kazim, a resident of Zanjan and one of its noted merchants. He attained to the presence of the Bab in Shiraz and accompanied him to Isfahan. His brother, Syed Murtaza, was one of the 7 martyrs of Tehran. 155. Iskandar, also a resident of Zanjan, who, together with Hassan and Quli, bore the body of Mullah Hussein to the fort. 156. Ismail. 157. Kabilai Abdul Ali. 158. Abdul Muhammad. 159. Haji Abbas. 160. Syed Ahmad, all residents of Zanjan. 161. Syed Hussein-e Kuladuz, a resident of Bafarush, whose head was impaled on a lance and was paraded through its streets. 162. Mullah Hassan-e Rashdi. 163. Mullah Hassan-e Bayajmandi. 164. Mullah Ni'matullah-e Bafarushi. 165. Mullah Muhammad Taqi-e Karakhili. 166. Ustad Zainul Abidin. 167. Ustad Kazim, son of Ustad Zainul Abidin. 168. Ustad Ali Akbar, brother of Ustad Zainul Abidin. The last 3 were masons by profession, were natives of Kirman, and resided in Qayin in the province of Khorasan. 169 and 170. Mullah Rizay-e-Shah and a young man from Bani Mir were slain 2 days after the abandonment of the fort by Qudus in the Panj Shabi Bazaar of Bafarush. Haji Mullah Muhammad-e Hamzi, surnamed the Shariat Madar, succeeded in burying their bodies in the neighborhood of the Masjid-e Qazim Beg, and in inducing their murderer to repent and ask forgiveness. 170. Mullah Muhammad-e Mu'allim-e Nuri, an intimate companion of Baha'u'llah, who was closely associated with him in Nur, in Tehran, and in Mazindaran. He was famed for his intelligence and learning, and was subjected, Qudus only expected, to the severest atrocities that have ever befallen a defender of the fort of Tabasi. The prince had promised that he would release him on condition that he would execrate the name of Qudus, and had pledged his word that, should he be willing to recant, he would take him back with him to Tehran and make him the tutor of his sons. "Never will I consent," he replied, "to vilify the beloved of God at the bidding of a man such as you. Were you to confer upon me the whole of the kingdom of Persia, I would not for one moment turn my face from my beloved leader. My body is at your mercy, my soul you are powerless to subdue. Torture me as you will. that I may be enabled to demonstrate to you the truth of the verse, "Then wish for death, if ye be men of truth." A quote from the Quran 294. The prince, infuriated by his answer, gave orders that his body be cut to pieces and that no effort be spared to inflict upon him a most humiliating punishment. 172. Haji Muhammad-e Karadi, whose home was situated in one of the palm groves adjoining the old city of Baghdad, a man of great courage who had fought and led 100 men in the war against Ibrahim Pasha of Egypt. He had been a fervent disciple of Sayyid Qasim, and was the author of a long poem in which he expatiated upon the virtues and merits of the Sayyid. He was 75 years old when he embraced the faith of the Bab, whom he likewise eulogized in an eloquent and detailed poem. He distinguished himself by his heroic acts during the siege of the fort, and eventually became a victim of the bullets of the enemy. 173. Sayyid-e-Jabavi, a native of Baghdad, who displayed extraordinary courage during the siege. He was shot in the abdomen, and, though severely wounded, managed to walk until he reached the presence of Qudus. He joyously threw himself at his feet and expired. The circumstances of the martyrdom of these last two companions were related by Sayyid Abu Talib-e-Sangsari, one of those who survived that memorable siege, in a communication he addressed to Baha'u'llah. In it he relates, in addition, his own story, as well as that of his two brothers, Sayyid Ahmad and Mir Abul Qasim, both of whom were martyred while defending the fort. On the day on which Khusro was slain, he wrote, "I happened to be the guest of a certain Kabelai Ali Jan, the Karkuda of one of the villages in the neighborhood of the fort. He had gone to assist in the protection of Khusro, and had returned and was relating to me the circumstances attending his death. On that very day a messenger informed me that 2 Arabs had arrived at that village and were anxious to join the occupants of the fort. They expressed their fear of the people of the village of Kadikala, and promised that they would amply reward whoever would be willing to conduct them to their destination. I recall the counsels of my father, Mir Muhammad Ali, who exhorted me to arise and help in the promotion of the cause of the Bab. I immediately decided to seize the opportunity that had presented itself to me, and together with these 2 Arabs, and with the aid and assistance of the Kadkuda, reached the fort, met Mullah Hussein, and determined to consecrate the remaining days of my life to the service of the cause he had chosen to follow." The names of some of the officers who distinguished themselves among the opponents of the companions of Qudus are as follows. 1. Prince Mihdi Kuli Mirza, brother of the late Muhammad Shah. 2. Suleiman Khan-e Afshar. 3. Haji Mustafa Khan-e Surtij. 4. Abdullah Khan, brother of Haji Mustafa Khan. 5. Abbas Kuli Khan-e Larijani, who shot Mullah Hussein. 6. Nurullah Khan-e Afghan. 7. Habibullah Khan-e Afghan. 8. Dul Fakhar Khan-e Karavuli. 9. Ali Asghar Khan-e Dungiyi. 10. Khuda Murad Khan-e Kurd. 11. Khalil Khan-e Savarkui. 12. Jafar Kuli Khan-e Surkhari. 13. The Sartib of the Fauj-e Kalbat. 14. Zakaria-e Qadi Kalai, a cousin of Khusro and his successor. As to those believers who participated in that memorable siege and survived its tragic end, I have been thus far unable to ascertain in full either their names or their number. I have contented myself with a representative, though incomplete, list of the names of its martyrs, trusting that in the days to come the valiant promoters of the faith will arise to fill this gap, and will, by their research and industry, be able to remedy the imperfections of this altogether inadequate description of what must ever remain as one of the most moving episodes of modern times.